Welcome. This is not a book of answers. It's an invitation to pause, to listen, to feel. Beneath the noise of thought, beneath the stories of self, there is a quiet space, always present, always aware. Each chapter is a reflection, not of who you've been or who you're trying to become, but of what's here now. Let this be your return to stillness, to presence, to the quiet truth that was never gone. Chapter 1. The Mystery of Consciousness. There is something strange happening right now. You are aware. You might be aware of this voice, the space you're in, the sensations of your body. Maybe thoughts are moving through your mind. Memories, anticipations, judgments, quiet background noise. But what's undeniable is that something is experiencing. Something is here, witnessing it all. We call that consciousness. And yet, even though it is the most immediate and intimate thing we ever encounter, we still don't know what it is. You could live an entire life without ever deeply questioning it, what it means to be aware. And most people do. Life rushes forward, filled with tasks, goals, identities. We're busy being someone. But beneath all of it, at every moment, is this open, silent space that is simply aware. What is it? Scientists can measure brain activity, track chemical reactions, and explain the mechanics of neurons firing. But the hard problem remains. Why should any of that produce experience? You can explain the structure of the eye, the way light becomes electrical impulses, how the brain interprets shape and contrast. But no scientific explanation can tell you why seeing a deep red rose feels like anything at all. You can break down the physics of sound waves, how the eardrum vibrates, how signals are carried to the auditory cortex. But that won't explain why certain music makes your chest ache, or why a lullaby can make tears rise in silence. The physical mechanisms are just that, mechanisms. What remains beyond them is the mystery, the experience itself, the raw, first-person, unmediated sense of being. This is what philosophers call the hard problem of consciousness. Not how the brain works, but why there is an experiencer at all. Why doesn't the machinery just run like a robot? Why is there a felt sense behind the process? Some argue that consciousness is an illusion, but that view collapses under its own weight. If consciousness were an illusion, who is being fooled? If awareness isn't real, then what is experiencing the illusion? Others say it's just a product of complexity, that if you build a brain with enough neurons and enough connections, consciousness will emerge. But this is not an explanation. It's a placeholder, a way of saying, we don't really know, but we hope complexity does the trick. Even if the brain creates consciousness, it doesn't explain why that should feel like anything. And so we arrive at the mystery. You can't locate consciousness in space. You can't measure it directly. You can't reduce it to parts. And yet, without it, nothing else appears. Consciousness is the one thing you can't doubt. Everything else, every belief, every thought, even your sense of identity, can shift, break down, or disappear. But awareness, it's the backdrop of it all. When you were a child, you were aware. When you're old, you'll still be aware. The contents of experience will change. Your body, your memories, your roles. But the knowing of experience, the simple being aware, is strangely constant. And still, we overlook it. We identify with the thoughts, the narrative voice in our heads that tells us who we are, what we should fear, what we should want. That voice is loud, and in its noise, we miss the silence that holds it all. But silence is not empty. It's full of presence, the presence that sees, hears, feels, and knows. If you stop right now and notice the space between thoughts, something becomes clear. The stillness is already here. You don't have to create it. You don't need to earn it. You just have to Notice. There's a reason so many spiritual traditions begin and end with awareness. Not because it explains everything, but because it includes everything. Thoughts arise in it. Emotions move through it. The body lives inside it. The world appears as a dance within it. But what is it? Some believe consciousness is a fundamental property of the universe. Not something created, but something expressed, like gravity or time. It simply is. Perhaps everything has some form of awareness, and what we call self-consciousness is just a more concentrated version of a deeper, more universal field. Others suggest that awareness is a kind of dream, that the world we perceive is shaped entirely by perception, and what we call reality is only an interpretation. But even if that's true, one thing doesn't change. We are aware that we are aware. This reflexive quality, the knowing of knowing, is the heart of the mystery. And you don't have to believe in anything to feel it. Take a breath. Feel the sensation in your chest. Notice the air passing through your nose. Feel the aliveness behind your eyes. That quiet hum of being. This is not something you think. It's something you are. The voice in your head will say, I am this body. I am this story. I am this personality. But if you look more closely, those are all appearances in consciousness. You can observe your body. You can watch your thoughts. You can feel your emotions. That which observes is not the thing observed. So who are you? This is not a question for the intellect to solve. It's a doorway, a pointer. It leads not to an answer, but to a shift, a falling away of assumptions, a deeper intimacy with the unknown. And maybe that's the point. Maybe consciousness is not a problem to solve, but a mystery to live. Maybe the goal is not to understand what consciousness is, but to rest more deeply in what it already feels like, to notice it in the small moments, the breath before speech, the pause before a thought, the quiet sense of being that never goes away. This journey doesn't ask you to believe anything. It only asks that you look, feel, be. Because the most profound discoveries often happen not through effort, but through presence. Right here, right now. What is looking through your eyes is not a thing. It's a presence. What is listening in your chest is not a voice. It's awareness. And the deeper you return to that awareness, the less urgent the questions become, the less fixed your identity feels, the more spacious everything becomes. This is the mystery. You are not inside consciousness. Consciousness is inside you, or perhaps more accurately, you are it. Not the person, not the name, not the history, but the open field in which all of it appears. And from this place, we begin. Let the rest of this journey not try to define the mystery, but to dance with it, to explore its edges, to sit inside its questions, to breathe more deeply into its presence. Because sometimes the most radical thing you can do is stop trying to figure it out and simply notice that you're already here. Chapter 2. The Illusion of Self. If you close your eyes and ask the question, who am I? Something interesting happens. At first, answers may come quickly. A name, a body, a role, a story. You might think, I am this person. I am this mind. I am this history. But if you pause long enough to look past the automatic answers, the question begins to open, not to clarity, but to emptiness. Because when we speak about the self, we assume it's something solid, a fixed identity sitting somewhere behind, the eyes, steering the ship of the body, making decisions, having experiences. But where exactly is it? Is it in the brain, the thoughts, the voice in your head that narrates your life? That voice is loud, familiar. But is it you? You can hear it. You can disagree with it. Sometimes it speaks harshly, other times not at all. But if you can observe it, then it is not the observer. You are not the voice. You are what hears the voice. So who is listening? Let's look more closely. What we call the self is not one thing, but a bundle of impressions, memories, sensations, emotions, habits, a constantly shifting story of who we think we are, stitched together from the past and projected into the future. One moment you're confident. The next, you're doubtful. One day, you're certain of your path. The next, you're lost. Thoughts rise and fall. Moods change. Desires fluctuate. So what is constant? Where is the self that stays the same through it all? Science has begun to echo what mystics have long said. The self is not a thing. It's a process, a construction, a model the brain builds moment to moment based on internal and external cues. We feel like we're a someone because the brain needs that story to function. It needs a narrator, a center, a reference point. So it builds one. But that doesn't make it real in the way we think it is. The sense of self is more like a movie character we've gotten lost in. Believable, compelling, but ultimately a fiction. This doesn't mean you don't exist. It means the idea of you is not as solid as it seems. Take, for example, the split brain phenomenon. In patients who have had the connection between the two brain hemispheres severed, often due to medical reasons, each half of the brain can operate independently. One hemisphere may pick up a spoon, while the other is unaware it happened. Even more strangely, the patient may confabulate, make up a reason for the action, without realizing they're doing it. It's unsettling, but also revealing. The brain is not unified. There isn't one central self in charge. There are systems, signals, processes, and somehow these fragments create the illusion of a unified me. That illusion is not bad. In fact, it can be useful. It helps us navigate the world. But suffering arises when we cling to it, when we believe we are the story, when we identify with every thought, every label, every judgment. When the story is good, we feel inflated. When the story is painful, we feel broken. Either way, we are trapped, riding the waves of a story we mistake for reality. But what happens when you look behind the story? Not to deny it, not to erase it, but to recognize the story is not you. You are the one aware of the story. That awareness doesn't change. It doesn't argue. It simply watches. If you've ever meditated, even for a few minutes, you've likely noticed this. Thoughts come. They go. Some are kind. Some are anxious. Some are deeply personal. Others are nonsense. But all of them appear in awareness and vanish. Who you are is not the content. Who you are is the space in which the content appears. Imagine the sky. Weather patterns move through it. Clouds, storms, lightning. But the sky itself remains untouched. Thoughts and feelings are like weather. You are the sky. This is not a metaphor. It's a shift in perception, a recognition. And when you recognize it, something begins to soften. The need to be someone in particular, the constant performing, managing, improving, starts to fall away. Not because life becomes passive, but because you are no longer caught in the illusion that your worth depends on your identity. You can still act, love, create, care, but not from fear, not from lack, from presence. This is what many contemplative traditions point toward when they speak of no self. It's not a denial of existence. It's the realization that the self is not what we thought. It's not a controller. It's not a center. It's a collection of habits arising in consciousness. And when you stop clinging to that collection, you begin to feel something else. Spaciousness, relief, freedom. Not the freedom to do whatever you want, but the freedom to be, without defending an identity, without protecting a mask, without carrying the heavy weight of me. This shift doesn't make life disappear. You still play roles. You still have a name, a story, a history. But they're worn more lightly. You can put them down. You can step out of the costume and rest. From that place, compassion flows more naturally, because you see the same illusion in others. You realize we are all walking around, protecting our masks, clinging to our stories, afraid of what it might mean if we let go. But what it means is not disappearance. What it means is presence. The truth is, the self doesn't need to be fixed. It needs to be seen through. And when it is, a deeper presence becomes available. One that doesn't speak in thoughts, doesn't argue or panic, but simply is. Quiet, open, aware. You don't need to destroy the self. You just need to stop mistaking it for who you are. And maybe that's the most beautiful realization of all. There's nothing wrong with you. There never was. There was just a misunderstanding. And now, you're waking up. Chapter 3. The Brain, the Body, and the Mind. We often speak as if these three, brain, body, and mind, are separate, as if one operates independently from the others. The brain is seen as the command center, the body as its vehicle, and the mind as something private and abstract, floating somewhere in between. But in truth, they are one inseparable system. And understanding consciousness means understanding how these parts move as one. The brain, physically, is a soft and complex structure. 3 pounds of tissue composed of roughly 86 billion neurons. It is not silent. It is electrically alive, generating chemical signals and electrical patterns every moment. And yet, nothing in its appearance suggests awareness. You could hold a brain in your hands and see no thought, no feeling, no image, only gray matter. The body, on the other hand, is often dismissed as a servant to the brain. But that view is outdated. The body is intelligent in its own right. It sends constant messages to the brain through the nervous system, your gut, your heart, your immune system. All influence your mood, memory, perception, even decision-making. The idea that consciousness lives only in the skull is a modern illusion. And the mind? That's where things get stranger. Because the mind is not a location. You cannot find it in the folds of the brain. You cannot touch it. But you can feel it. It's the experience of thoughts, memories, inner commentary, feelings. The stream of lived awareness that gives shape to your reality. So how are they connected? Let's begin with embodiment. We often think of thinking as something purely mental, but most of what you think and feel is shaped by what your body is sensing. Anxiety isn't just a thought. It's a full-body signal. Confidence isn't a belief. It's a posture, a tone, a rhythm in your breath. When you feel threatened, your body tightens before your mind even registers danger. The nervous system reacts faster than thought. The vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the heart, lungs, and gut, plays a major role in how we feel emotionally. It regulates our ability to feel safe, grounded, and connected. A dysregulated nervous system can make the world feel unsafe even when nothing is wrong, and a calm body can bring clarity to the most tangled thought. You are not a brain steering a machine. You are a living system, a field of energy, sensation, memory, and responsiveness. And the mind, the conscious experience, emerges through that system, not apart from it. What we call mental health is deeply physical. Trauma, for example, is not just a memory in the brain. It's an imprint in the body, a nervous system stuck in a loop of protection. You can't think your way out of trauma because the injury wasn't purely cognitive. The healing has to include the body, the breath, the sensory system. And still, we try to fix our inner worlds with thought alone. But the truth is, thought is late. Thought is always the last to know. The body feels first. It knows when something is off, when something is safe, when something is true, and we override that knowing constantly because we've been taught to privilege the mind, especially the rational, verbal, analytical mind, above all else. Yet studies in neuroscience show something curious. Most decisions are made before we're conscious of them. The brain acts, and only afterward does the mind create a story to explain why. In other words, your sense of agency, of being in control, is often a postscript. You act, then you narrate. This challenges everything we believe about free will, but it also reveals something deeper. That consciousness is not the operator we think it is. It is more like a mirror, reflecting the total state of the system. The mind is not driving the body. It is the body, seen from the inside. And this brings us to a powerful realization. Consciousness is not in the brain. It is not even in the body. It is the body-brain system in awareness, alive, connected, responsive, present. Think of a feeling. Love, for instance, is that in your mind, your heart, your chemistry, your memory, your hormones? The answer is yes to all. Love is not a thing that lives in one place. It is an emergent experience, arising from the whole. The same is true for all emotion, all insight, all perception. Every thought is shaped by 1,000 tiny factors. How much you've slept, what you've eaten, how you're sitting, the tone in someone's voice, the tension in your jaw. These aren't distractions from thinking. They are the thinking. The more we begin to see this, the more compassion we feel, not just for ourselves, but for others. Because you realize, people are not just ideas or opinions. They are whole systems, shaped by experience, regulated or dysregulated, aware or unaware of what drives them. Understanding the unity of brain, body, and mind is not just a scientific insight. It is a path to healing. It reminds you that you don't have to solve your pain intellectually. You can breathe. You can move. You can listen to your body. You can let stillness speak. It also invites us to become more honest. Sometimes you don't feel right, and there's no story. Sometimes the body simply says no. Sometimes your mind races because your nervous system is tired. And that doesn't mean anything is wrong with you. It means the system needs care. The journey of consciousness is not a ladder. It is a spiral, inward, into sensation, into breath, into presence. When you begin to live from the body, not just through it, something shifts. Awareness becomes grounded. Thought becomes softer. Insight becomes embodied. And the mystery of consciousness begins to unfold. Not in abstract theory, but in felt experience. You begin to understand that you are not a separate mind, floating above a body. You are not a brain trying to fix a machine. You are not a voice in your head, detached from the rest. You are an organism, a presence, a field of awareness and motion. And that awareness is not limited to thought. It includes thought, but it is far more. It is rhythm. It is breath. It is the wisdom of your spine, your skin, your gut. And when you trust that wisdom, when you begin to feel your life, rather than just think about it, you step into a deeper relationship with yourself, not as a problem to solve, but as a living process to listen to care for, to inhabit fully. Because consciousness is not a concept. It is the felt reality of being alive. Chapter 4. Free Will and the Flow of Choice. You like to believe you are in control, that your choices are yours, thought through, deliberate, intentional. You choose what to eat, where to live, who to love, what to believe. And yet, the deeper we look into the nature of decision-making, the more the illusion of control begins to unravel. Free will, the sense that you are a separate agent freely making choices, is one of the most cherished beliefs in modern culture. It is the foundation of moral responsibility, of identity, of the entire idea of the self. But what happens when we look more closely? Neuroscience has shown that many of your decisions are made before you're aware of them. Brain scans reveal that patterns of activity indicating a choice can appear several seconds before the person reports being aware of making that decision. Your consciousness, in other words, may not be the origin of your actions. It may be a witness, a narrator, coming in after the fact to explain what's already happening. This doesn't mean you are a puppet, but it does raise a profound question. If you don't consciously choose your thoughts, your emotions, or your impulses, if they simply arise, then what exactly is choosing? Take a moment to try this. Choose your next thought. Really, try to decide what thought will come next. You'll find it's impossible. Thoughts arise. You don't summon them. Even when you say, "I'm going to think about X," that intention was itself a thought that just appeared. The thinker, it turns out, is a thought itself, part of the flow, not the source. And if you're not choosing your thoughts, can you really be said to be choosing your actions? Especially when those actions are built on the structure of thought. The concept of free will begins to dissolve. But this isn't cause for despair. In fact, it can be liberating. Because what arises in its place is a deeper kind of freedom. Not the freedom to control every outcome, but the freedom to witness the unfolding of life without the constant pressure of authorship. You're not the scriptwriter, you're the screen, the awareness in which the play appears. This recognition softens judgment of yourself and others. When you see that no one chooses their genetics, their childhood, their traumas, their nervous system patterns, their first thoughts or emotional conditioning, how can you cling to blame? People still cause harm. Actions still have consequences, but the framework changes. Punishment gives way to understanding. Condemnation makes room for compassion. Responsibility is not erased, it is redefined. Not as blame, but as responsiveness, as presence. To say there is no free will doesn't mean there's no will. It means the you that claims ownership of it may not be what you think. Will is part of nature. Intention arises. Decisions happen, but they do so within a vast context of conditioning, biology, environment, history. When you stop grasping at authorship, you begin to flow more easily with what is. You begin to feel into choices rather than force them. You notice patterns unfolding rather than trying to dominate them. Life becomes less about control and more about participation. It's like a river. You don't control the current, but you can learn to feel it. You can sense when to move, when to rest, when to let go. That's the real art of life. Not to command, but to collaborate. Paradoxically, this surrender often leads to wiser decisions. Because when you stop identifying with every thought, every urge, every inner push and pull, you start to listen more deeply. You begin to sense what's true beneath the noise, a kind of intuitive clarity that isn't made, but received. This is not passivity, it's presence. And from presence, action arises naturally. You've likely experienced this, moments where you weren't analyzing, and yet you acted with precision. Times when words flowed without rehearsal, when you knew without knowing how. That's the space beyond the illusion of control, where life moves through you. In that space, even mistakes are met with softness. Regret gives way to understanding. You stop punishing yourself for what you didn't see. You begin to trust. If I had known better, I would have done better. And now that I see more clearly, I respond differently. This, too, is the unfolding of will, not as ego, but as energy, as movement, as the dance of awareness expressing itself through form. And still, in daily life, we must act. We must choose. We must decide. But we can do so with humility. not as the controller, but as the collaborator, not as the master, but as the listener. The truth is, you didn't choose to be born. You didn't choose your DNA. You didn't choose your first thought, your first breath, your first love, your first fear, but you are here, awake, aware, able to notice, to feel, to respond. And that, in itself, is a miracle. There's a kind of sacredness in letting go of control, not as surrender to fate, but as an embrace of the unknown. You begin to see life, not as a machine to operate, but as a mystery to live. You begin to walk with your eyes open, hands open, heart open, letting life move through you, letting choice arise from clarity, not compulsion. In this, you discover a deeper truth, that the only real freedom is in awareness itself, not in choosing what happens, but in how fully you meet it, not in controlling the mind, but in resting in the space beyond it, not in forcing a path, but in sensing the rhythm and moving with it. So, the question is no longer, do I have free will? The question becomes, can I be present for what's arising? And from that presence, not from identity or effort, but from clarity, action flows, not yours, not mine, but life's. And that may be the most freeing truth of all. Chapter 5. Perception and Reality. What you call reality is not the world itself. It's your experience of it. Everything you see, hear, taste, and feel is filtered through your brain, interpreted by your nervous system, and shaped by layers of memory, emotion, belief, and expectation. You are not seeing the world as it is. You are seeing the world as you are. Light enters your eyes, but the world you perceive is not made of light. It's made of meaning. Sound enters your ears, but the music you hear is not in the sound wave. It's in the experience. This is the great unnoticed truth of perception. You do not perceive reality directly. You construct it. Take the example of vision. Your eyes receive a flood of sensory data, photons striking the retina, electrical impulses firing down the optic nerve. But what you see is not raw data. It is a visual field filled with shape, depth, movement, and color. A seamless, vivid world. And yet, that world is an interpretation. There is no color in the external world. Color is what your brain creates to represent differences in light, wavelength. There is no motion out there. Motion is a perception stitched together from frames of data over time. Even depth, your sense of 3D space, is a mental model built from comparison and inference. The same is true of sound. Your ears detect changes in air pressure, but you don't hear pressure waves. You hear birdsong, traffic, laughter, words. Meaning is not in the signal. It is in the interpretation. This is not just theory. Your brain fills in gaps constantly. It guesses. It edits. It prioritizes. Your visual field, for example, has a blind spot, a region where the optic nerve connects that contains no photoreceptors. But you don't see a hole. The brain fills it in. Even more striking is how belief shapes perception. What you expect to see, you are more likely to see. What you believe about someone changes how you hear them. What you fear changes how you interpret neutral expressions. Your state of mind colors your world, not metaphorically, but literally. When you're anxious, your brain becomes more attuned to threat. When you're sad, the world seems slower, heavier. When you're joyful, everything appears brighter, more open, more connected. The world doesn't change. You do. This can feel unsettling. If everything is filtered, then what is real? But this isn't a reason to despair. It's an invitation to look deeper. Because behind the stories, beyond the filters, is a stable presence, the awareness in which all perceptions arise. You may not see the world as it is, but you can see the seeing. You can notice the process. You can become aware of awareness, and that changes everything. It opens the door to a different kind of clarity, not one based on perfect information, but on honest observation. You begin to notice your filters. You recognize your assumptions. You see how quickly the mind fills in the blanks. And in that seeing, something softens. You stop taking your interpretations as truth. You start meeting experience with more openness, more humility, more curiosity. Even the self you think you are, the I behind the eyes, is shaped by perception. When you look for the self, you find sensations, memories, roles, and thoughts, but you don't find a solid center. You find a stream, a flow, and that flow is constantly influenced by what you perceive. Your sense of who you are can shift dramatically based on context. Around certain people, you feel confident. Around others, you shrink. Sometimes you feel grounded, sometimes reactive. Sometimes you feel like a stranger to yourself. But these shifts are not flaws. They're signs that the self is not fixed. It is fluid, responsive, lived. And the more you recognize this, the less tightly you cling to any one identity. You become more present, more real. Not because you know what's out there, but because you're awake to what's happening in here. You stop demanding that your perceptions be right. And you start asking, what is this showing me? You begin to hold your beliefs more lightly. You listen more deeply. You notice the gap between sensation and story. And in that gap, you find freedom. This doesn't mean you reject the world. It means you engage with it more consciously. You see the role of perception. And instead of being trapped in it, you become aware of its movement. Reality becomes less something to define and more something to dance with. You are not separate from what you perceive. The world is not out there, waiting for you to decode it. It arises with you, through you, in you. This is not abstraction. It's intimacy. Because when you realize that what you see is shaped by how you see, you start taking care of your perception. You choose to move from presence, not projection. From clarity, not assumption. You slow down. You pause before reacting. You listen not just with your ears, but with your whole body. And slowly, perception becomes less about control and more about communion. You don't need to dismantle your mind. You only need to see through it, to notice how it shapes what you call real. Because behind the layers of interpretation is something simple, quiet, direct, not the thing perceived, not the story about it, but the awareness of it. And in that awareness, reality becomes less rigid and more alive. Not a fixed world of objects and labels, but a living, breathing process of discovery. Not a place to conquer, but a field to explore. Not a static truth, but a dynamic unfolding. Perception is not the enemy of reality, it is the doorway to it. And when you walk through that door with your eyes open, your heart open, your senses awake, you find that the world is not something outside of you. It is something you are part of, something you belong to, something that, at its core, is not separate from the awareness that sees it. And in that meeting, that quiet, spacious noticing, reality becomes not just what you experience. It becomes what you are. Chapter 6. Consciousness and the Brain. Science has mapped the brain in astonishing detail. We've identified areas responsible for language, memory, emotion, vision, decision-making, and even moral reasoning. We know how signals travel, how neurons fire, how chemicals shape moods and behaviors. And yet, for all this precision, one question remains unanswered. How does any of this give rise to experience? How do physical processes, electrochemical reactions, protein formations, synaptic firings. Produce the feeling of being. What turns the brain into a mind? This is the heart of the mystery of consciousness. Because while it's clear that consciousness and the brain are intimately linked, no one knows how awareness emerges from physical matter, or even if it does at all. Let's look at what we do know. Damage to certain areas of the brain affects behavior and experience. A stroke in one part of the brain might erase language. An injury in another might change personality. Drugs, too, alter perception, mood, even the sense of self. These correlations are undeniable, but correlation is not explanation. If the brain is the source of consciousness, then how does it generate it? This is what's often called the hard problem of consciousness. The gap between physical structure and subjective experience. You can explain what parts of the brain light up during joy, or pain, or memory, but that still doesn't explain why it feels like something to have those experiences. Some scientists argue that consciousness is an emergent property, that when the brain reaches a certain level of complexity, awareness simply appears. But this is a description, not an explanation. Complexity is not a cause. A pile of sand has countless grains, but it never wakes up. So what is it about the brain, or perhaps the way it functions, that creates awareness? Others suggest that consciousness is an illusion, that we only believe we are aware because of how the brain models itself. But this argument breaks down on its own terms. Even if the sense of self is constructed, there must still be something that experiences the illusion. You can't have a hallucination without someone hallucinating. There's also the question of localization. Where exactly is consciousness in the brain? Despite all our technology, fMRI, EEG, PT scans, no one has found a consciousness center. No single region lights up as the self. Instead, awareness seems to arise from patterns of interaction across the brain, a dynamic process, rather than a fixed location. This has led some researchers to suggest that consciousness is a field, not a structure, a process of integration, a way the brain harmonizes activity into a unified experience. The global workspace theory, for example, proposes that consciousness is what happens when information becomes available across the whole system. Like a spotlight on a stage, other processes still happen in the dark, but what's in the light is what we become aware of. Then there's the integrated information theory, IIT, which posits that consciousness arises from systems that integrate information in a specific, measurable way. According to IIT, anything that possesses a high degree of information integration, even artificial systems, may possess some degree of consciousness. This raises uncomfortable questions. Could a computer, sufficiently advanced, become conscious? Could an artificial brain feel? If consciousness is a function of integration and complexity, then perhaps awareness is not unique to biology. Perhaps it is a property of systems, wherever they arise. And if that's true, then consciousness might not be exclusive to humans, or even animals. It could exist on a spectrum. Plants, networks, ecosystems, all may have some rudimentary form of awareness. Not like ours. Not with language or memory or personality, but still, something. This idea is not new. Ancient traditions have long suggested that consciousness is fundamental, not something created by matter, but something that underlies it. In this view, the brain doesn't produce consciousness, it tunes into it. Like a radio receives signals already in the air. From this perspective, the brain is a filter, a narrowing device that allows a particular slice of experience to come through. Consciousness itself is vast. What we experience is just a drop. This view aligns with some interpretations of quantum theory, where the act of observation appears to play a role in shaping physical outcomes. While controversial and often misunderstood, these interpretations point to something radical. That consciousness may not be inside space and time, it may be prior to them. Still, the mystery remains. No theory, physical, computational, or metaphysical, fully explains the leap from mechanism to mind. And perhaps it never will, because maybe consciousness is not a thing to be solved. Maybe it is the space in which solving happens. Every experiment, every theory, every exploration all occur within awareness. Even our tools for studying consciousness are built from within it. We are using consciousness to investigate consciousness. And that brings us to a strange kind of loop. The observer observing the observer. This may sound abstract, but it has practical implications. Because once you begin to recognize that everything you experience, every thought, feeling, sensation, appears within awareness, something begins to shift. You stop trying to find consciousness as an object. You start to notice it as the subject, not something you see, but something you are. This is not to say the brain is irrelevant. It is clearly involved. Consciousness needs a vehicle, a form, to express itself. But the form is not the essence. A flute is necessary for music, but it is not the music. The brain is the instrument. Awareness is the sound. And when you begin to live from that recognition, not just as a concept, but as a felt truth, life becomes different. You start to sense that what you are is not limited to thought, memory, or role. You are not a brain. You are not even a mind. You are the field in which mind arises. This isn't an escape from the world. It's a fuller entrance into it. You walk not as a thing among other things, but as consciousness itself, meeting form. And in that meeting, the mystery deepens. Not because it becomes more confusing, but because it becomes more intimate. You are not trying to answer the question of consciousness anymore. You are living it. Chapter 7. The Inner Voice. There is a voice inside your head. You know the one. It narrates, analyzes, compares, judges, replays the past, rehearses the future. It talks about you, to you, through you. It almost never stops. And yet, most people never question it. This voice is often mistaken for the self. It says, I am thinking, and so you believe you are the thinker. It says, I shouldn't have said that, and you feel shame. It says, what if this goes wrong? And you feel fear. But step back and notice, you can hear the voice. That means you are not the voice. You are the awareness hearing the voice. This inner voice is a function of the mind. It's a tool, a way of processing, predicting, rehearsing, organizing. But like any tool, when used unconsciously, it can become a prison, and for many, it has. The voice critiques your every move. It questions your worth. It drags you into arguments that never happened and defenses you don't need. It creates entire identities, replaying past wounds and future anxieties in loops that never resolve. And because it's constant, we assume it's us. But it isn't. This realization is one of the most liberating recognitions a person can have, that your thoughts are not facts, that the voice in your head is not a narrator of truth, but a generator of interpretation. And that interpretation is shaped by fear, history, habit, culture, emotion, and belief, not just reality. Why does this voice exist? The inner voice evolved as a way to help humans survive. It helps us simulate situations, solve problems, anticipate dangers. It replays the past so we can avoid mistakes, and rehearses the future to plan our actions. But in modern life, especially in overstimulated, anxious environments, this voice can become overactive, intrusive, and disconnected from the present moment. It becomes a source of stress instead of support. It becomes a wall between you and what's actually happening. How much of your life has been lived inside that commentary? How many beautiful moments have been missed because you were lost in thought? How many simple joys drowned out by rehearsed conversations, imagined outcomes, or internal criticism? And yet, the voice is not the enemy. It only becomes harmful when it's believed without awareness. The solution is not to silence it, but to see through it. Begin by listening. Just watch it. As you would listen to someone speaking on a train, let it ramble. Let it complain. Let it compare. Don't argue. Don't agree. Just listen. From awareness. From stillness. And something subtle happens. A space opens up between you and the thought. That space is presence. And in that space, the voice begins to lose its grip. You start to notice its patterns. You see that it often repeats itself. That it rarely offers anything new. That it cycles. Shame to fear. Fear to control. Control to doubt. And then back again. You begin to see that it's not personal. It's mechanical, habitual, a program running on old scripts. Some of those scripts are internalized voices from childhood, parents, teachers, peers. Others come from media, culture, trauma, and yet we carry them as if they are our own. But they're not. They are thoughts, not truth, not self, just thoughts. When you realize this, you gain freedom, not by defeating the voice, but by relating to it differently. Instead of being inside the story, you become the one observing it. And from there, you begin to feel a deeper voice, a quieter one. Beneath the mental noise is a different kind of knowing. It doesn't speak in arguments or predictions. It speaks in sensations, intuitions, quiet nudges. It feels like calm. Like truth, like yes, like no. This voice does not demand. It invites. It doesn't analyze. It knows. It's not in the head. It's in the body, the breath, the now. Learning to hear this voice requires silence. Not the absence of thought, but the willingness to sit with what is, to be still, to breathe, to drop below the surface narrative. And wait. It might come as a feeling in the chest, a softening, a tension, a resonance. You begin to ask, what feels true right now? Not what do I think is true, but what feels aligned. This is not about escaping thought. Thought has its place. It can be a beautiful servant, precise, creative, articulate. But it is a terrible master. When the inner voice dominates, presence is lost. But when presence leads, thought can serve. So how do you return to presence? Start small. Notice the voice when it rises. Label it. Thinking. That alone creates distance. Bring your attention to the breath, to the body, to the senses. What do you see? What do you hear? What is the texture of this moment? You will be pulled back into thought. That's okay. Return again. And again. Over time, you begin to live with the voice, but not as the voice. You use thought, but don't drown in it. You hear the inner critic, but don't believe it. You plan the future, but return to now. You live, not as a narrator, but as a witness, as presence itself. And from that presence, something beautiful unfolds. You become more compassionate with yourself and others. Because you see how many of us are trapped in the same loops, believing the same scripts, haunted by the same inner noise. And in that seeing, your heart softens. You become more creative, because when the inner critic quiets, space opens for inspiration. Insight flows more freely when it's not choked by doubt. You become more peaceful, not because life is perfect, but because your relationship to your thoughts has changed. The waves still come, but they no longer capsize you. And slowly, the inner voice transforms. It softens. It becomes less reactive, less rigid, less cruel. It begins to reflect your deeper self, your kindness, your clarity, your wisdom. Because thought is not the problem. Identification is. You are not the storm of thought. You are the sky in which it appears. You are not the narrator. You are the presence that hears. Chapter 8. Emotions, messengers of the moment. Emotions often get a bad reputation. In many cultures, they're seen as irrational, unpredictable, even dangerous. We're taught to control them, to get over them, to keep it together, especially the so-called negative ones: anger, sadness, fear, shame. These are emotions we're told to manage, suppress, fix. But emotions are not problems. They are messengers. They are the language of the body, intelligent, immediate, alive. They don't come to harm you. They come to speak. Every emotion you feel arises for a reason. Not always a reason you consciously understand, but a reason that your nervous system, your deeper self, recognizes. A need unmet. A boundary crossed. A truth denied. A loss ungrieved. To ignore emotions is to ignore your inner guidance system. To push them away is to push away your own voice. So what happens when you stop resisting emotion and start listening? You begin to understand that emotions are not static things. They are processes, waves that rise, crest, and fall. When allowed to move naturally, most emotions pass within 90 seconds. What prolongs them is resistance. The stories we attach to them, the judgments, the inner dialogue that says, "This shouldn't be here," or "What's wrong with me?" But there is nothing wrong with feeling. Feelings don't make you weak. They make you real. They connect you to your body, your environment, your humanity. They are not obstacles to awakening. They are doorways to presence. Anger, for instance, is often misunderstood. It's not just rage or outburst. It's energy, clarity, a signal that something needs to change, that a boundary has been crossed. When met with awareness, anger can reveal deep truth, but when suppressed, it becomes resentment, irritation, passive aggression. Sadness, too, has wisdom. It speaks of loss, of longing, of love. It opens the heart. It humbles the mind. It reminds you what matters. When honored, sadness softens you. It connects you to others. When denied, it hardens into numbness or despair. Fear, so often avoided, is also an ally. It protects, it alerts. But left unexamined, fear can grow out of proportion, feeding anxiety and paralysis. When faced with presence, fear often reveals a need for safety, support, or rest. Even shame, as painful as it is, carries a message. At its core, shame says, "I am not enough." But that message is not truth. It is a wound, a place that needs compassion, not punishment. When shame is seen clearly, without judgment, it often reveals a longing to belong, to be seen, to be loved. The key is not to fix emotions, but to feel them fully, without fusing with them, without acting them out, without pushing them down. This requires a kind of skill, emotional presence. Emotional presence means turning toward your experience with curiosity, not control. It means asking, "What is this emotion trying to tell me?" instead of, "How do I make this go away?" It means creating space, breathing with the feeling, sensing it in the body, allowing it to rise and fall in its own rhythm. You may find that the emotion has a shape, a texture, a temperature. You may feel it in your chest, your gut, your throat. It may pulse or ache or burn. Let it move. Let it speak. Not with words, but with sensation. Often, just by feeling an emotion without resistance, Something shifts, a tightness releases, a wave passes, a clarity emerges, and in that clarity, you become more honest, more human, more whole, because emotions, when embraced, become wisdom. They become intuition. They become guides. The more you allow yourself to feel, the more you learn to trust yourself. Not just your thoughts, your felt sense, the part of you that knows, even when the mind is uncertain. This doesn't mean indulging every mood or acting on every impulse. It means honoring the feeling without being ruled by it, creating a sacred pause, feeling without fusing. It also means becoming more compassionate toward others. When you recognize the waves in yourself, you recognize them in others. You stop expecting people to be emotionally perfect. You start listening, not just to their words, but to their tone, their posture, their energy. You see that anger may mask hurt, that fear may hide beneath control, that silence may carry sadness. And in seeing this, your heart softens. You meet people where they are, not in judgment, but in presence. This is emotional maturity, not the absence of feeling, but the ability to feel deeply without being overwhelmed. And it grows in stillness, in breath, in embodied awareness. Because the truth is, emotions are not here to torment you. They're here to move you, to deepen you, to guide you. They are not signs of failure. They are signs of aliveness. So the next time a strong emotion rises, try not to run. Try not to explain it away. Try not to label it good or bad. Instead, pause. Breathe. Feel. Ask, what is this trying to show me? And then listen. Not with the mind, but with the whole of you. Because beneath the surface of every emotion is a deeper message. And beneath that message is presence. And beneath that presence is love. Chapter 9. The Edge of Thought. Thought is one of the most powerful tools we have. It allows us to plan, imagine, communicate, analyze, and create. It can build bridges, write poetry, solve equations, and hold memory. But for all its brilliance, thought has limits, and few people ever reach the edge. Most live entirely within thought, never realizing that there is anything beyond it. The mind spins stories, explains reality, creates identities. And we live inside those stories, rarely questioning their truth. We confuse the map with the territory, the label with the thing, the thought with the truth. But there is a boundary to thought. And if you get quiet enough, still enough, honest enough, you can feel it. It is the edge where thought can no longer reach. Try to think your way into love. You can describe it, analyze its biology, recall memories of it. But those thoughts are not love. The feeling is something else. Try to explain beauty. You can write about colors, shapes, harmony. But the moment of awe, of wonder, of stillness in front of a sunset or a painting is not thought. It's presence. Try to define truth. Words will come. Arguments. Concepts. But the deepest truths are not spoken. They are felt. They arise not from thinking, but from being. Thought can point, but it cannot arrive. At some point, all true inquiry reaches silence. Not because the mind has failed, but because it has gone as far as it can go. It has reached its limit. And in that limit, something else opens. Awareness, the space in which thought happens. The field behind the words. This is the edge of thought, and beyond it is not blankness, but presence, aliveness, a kind of luminous silence. You have already tasted this, whether you realized it or not. In moments of awe, when you look up at the stars and forget yourself. In moments of grief, when words fail and only feeling remains. In moments of love, when the world softens and time disappears. In moments of peace, when everything inside you says, yes, just this. These are not thoughts. They are experiences. Direct, unfiltered, real. The mind may try to explain them afterward, but in the moment itself, you are not thinking. You are being. This is the invitation to recognize the mind as a tool, not a master. To use thought skillfully, then set it down. To stop living entirely inside the head and return to the fullness of now. Thought can name a tree, but it cannot feel the breeze in its leaves. It can write about hunger, but it cannot taste a peach. It can describe sadness, but it cannot cry for you. It can imagine stillness, but it cannot be still. And this is not a rejection of thought. It is an honoring of its place. When thought is seen clearly, it becomes beautiful, useful, creative, flexible. It no longer claims to be the whole truth. It becomes a bridge between inner and outer worlds. But when thought is mistaken for truth itself, it becomes rigid, defensive, loud, fragile. It turns life into a problem to solve rather than a mystery to live. And so the journey becomes not about eliminating thought, but about seeing through it, about noticing the space between thoughts, about recognizing the difference between thinking and knowing, between mental chatter and felt truth. One way to explore this is through simple presence. Right now, pause. Let the next thought come. Now, wait. What happens? You may notice that thoughts don't come on command. They arise on their own. Some are useful. Some are noise. Some are echoes of the past. Some are images of the future. But they are all appearances in awareness. And that awareness, silent, clear, open, is untouched. You are not the content of thought. You are the context in which it appears. This is the freedom that lies beyond the mind, not a blankness, not a detachment, but an intimacy so deep that it needs no words. And from that intimacy, a new kind of thinking becomes possible, one grounded in stillness, one shaped by presence, one aligned with truth, not fear. You begin to think with the body, not just the brain. You begin to imagine from love, not lack. You begin to speak from clarity, not reactivity. And when thought arises from presence, it carries power, not because it is loud, but because it is true. This is the paradox. To use thought fully, you must go beyond it. You must reach its edge and listen. Listen, not for more words, but for what remains when the words fall away. That is where insight lives. That is where truth reveals itself. That is where you remember, not as a concept, but as a living knowing, that you are not the thinker. You are the space behind the thought. You are the awareness that listens. You are the presence that sees. And that presence is vast, alive, and free. Always here. Always now. Always beyond the edge. Chapter 10. The Quiet Center. At the heart of all the noise, beneath the thoughts, emotions, stories, and striving, there is a quiet center. You may not notice it often. It doesn't shout. It doesn't demand. But it's always there. It's the place you return to in stillness. The awareness you fall into when you finally let go. The calm you sense after the storm of thinking passes. It's not something you create. It's something you remember. This center is not a place in space. It's not a point in the body. It's not even an idea. It's a way of being, a grounded, open, alert presence that isn't trying to become anything, because it already is. You may have glimpsed it in meditation, or walking alone, or watching light move through trees. In those rare moments when time stops, when your Not performing, not reacting, just here, fully, quietly, alive. That quiet center is who you are beneath the noise. It doesn't have your name. It doesn't have your history. It doesn't carry your fears or your roles. It's deeper than identity, simpler than explanation. It's not caught in narratives of success or failure. It's the part of you that watches everything arise and lets everything pass. And yet, this center is not disconnected. It's not aloof or numb. It's intimate with life, responsive, real. The more you rest in it, the more clearly you see, not just yourself, but everything. From this place, you no longer need to defend yourself constantly. You don't have to prove anything. You don't have to fix your past or predict your future. Because here, in this still point, you realize you were never broken. You were only distracted. Distracted by thought, by emotion, by identity, by effort. All of that is part of being human, but none of it defines you. What defines you, if anything can, is this quiet, vast awareness in which everything happens. And the most beautiful part is, it's not far away. You don't have to seek it in a cave or earn it through effort. You only have to notice, to pause, to turn inward, to feel the space between moments. Right now, try this. Close your eyes. Take a breath. Don't try to reach anything. Just notice what's already here. Thoughts may come. Let them. Sensations may rise. Let them. Emotions, memories, distractions. Let it all be. You're not trying to stop anything. You're simply shifting your attention from the content to the context, from what you're experiencing to the fact that you're aware. That awareness, open, clear, unmoving, is your quiet center. And the more you recognize it, the more it becomes your home. Not in a rigid, fixed way, but in a soft, flexible, grounded way. A way of moving through life without being lost in it. You can speak from this place, act from this place, love from this place, even grieve from this place. And when you do, your actions carry a different quality. They're not reactive. They're responsive. Not anxious, but aligned. Not desperate, but clear. This is the power of returning. Because you will forget. The world is loud. The mind is persuasive. The emotions are strong. And that's okay. Forgetting is not failure. It's part of the rhythm. The key is not to stay centered all the time. The key is to return, again and again. To remember, yes, I am not the thought. I am not the feeling. I am not the story. I am the space in which all of this moves. With practice, the gap between forgetting and remembering gets shorter. The return gets gentler. You spend less time caught in the storm and more time resting in the stillness behind it. This stillness is not passive. It's alive. It's creative. It listens. It knows. And the more you listen to it, the more trust grows. Not in the mind, but in the moment. Not in the voice in your head, but in the quiet that holds it. Because in the end, everything you seek, peace, freedom, clarity, love, all of it already exists in this quiet center. Not as a goal, not as a reward, but as a truth. A truth you've always known, but perhaps forgotten. Now, you remember. Not with the mind, but with your whole being. You rest, you breathe, you return. And in that return, you find everything you thought you had to chase. Already here, already whole, already enough. Thank you for listening.